Siege here today. Well, today, you all know that we ask the tough questions here, and during one of the channel's live streams, a few viewers postulated a question that I could not at first contemplate, and in truth remains somewhat of a mystery, although I can provide some interesting context, I think. Where are all the aliens in Warframe? After all, the Orokin had already made interstellar travel fairly trivial, at least at some point during their reign, largely, of course, aided by the finger of the man on the wall and the associated research that came with it, as well as many other forms of technology, far surpassing the limits of imagination in many ways. But where are all the aliens? While you can make the case that variations of endemic life exist on different planets, count, I suppose, the lack of any true alien races, as well as the similarities of so many species residing on those planets in ways suggest that the Orokin would populate new planets with life from others. So there's no true proof any of what we see outside of Earth actually originated from some alien capacity. Think about it. The Orokin are just human beings, themselves evolving to what I would deem a mix of transhumanistic modification and arcane augmentation would invariably show in some ways. Their long arms, altered skin color, and even eye color at times appearing as the consequences of all of it. Given their desire for beauty and symmetry, I would even argue the arm would almost have to be a somehow necessary evil those who dabbled in certain rituals were forced to accept as the price for their perceived divinity.
In a ceremony reeking of Kuva, the Orokin candidate would force their consciousness into the new chosen body, the Yuvan, consigning the mind of the hapless former owner to oblivion. They call this life-extending process continuity. It is unclear precisely why Lua is a site of very special void conjunctions, but enacting continuity within the Circulus and Uvarium thereupon guaranteed a safe and strong transition, so long as certain rituals were correctly observed. A privilege reserved only for the Seven themselves. Imagine the scene as the innocent Yuvan would have witnessed it, the vivid insanity of it all. The appointed soprana bridging the gap between worlds with her song, the Orokin executor shrilling the ritual words, the bone-white void creeping in on all fronts, the Kuva steaming scarlet in its glass bowl.
Especially with such a rich history of being able to heal themselves from some pretty incredible injuries. Now, the Corpus are a merchant cult, also founded by a young human under Orokin rule, Parvis Granum.
Day after day, we toiled. My father, my brother Claudius, pulling grains for the Orokin takers in the city, as our kind had done for generations. It was on one such afternoon that I was fated to first hear that glorious sound. A whisper I strained to hear, in a tongue not of man, but of something else, something grander, a language I understood instinctively, the language of desire. In desire, I was wealthy, but in strategy, I was empty-handed. I listened for the whisper. It said, money begets money. With my jewel as collateral, I secured a loan, and with that sum, I gave my own loans to poor men like me who desired more. With each loan, I dispensed truths I had learned from the whisper. Those men went out into the world and they too made loans, and their money too begat money. Word spread fast, men flocked to hear me. I told them of the evils of contentment and idleness. I taught them the gift of desire.
himself breaking the chains of his own poverty to bring about a powerful faction in its own right. But of humans, augmented certainly, but still humans nonetheless. The Grineer, well, they're largely genetically modified, low-quality, purpose-bred clones, and are certainly not aliens by any discernible metric. Interestingly enough, even the Sentients are products of, originally at least, human ingenuity, created by an Archimedean named Parental, with the intended purpose of breeding terraforming machines that would in fact allow the Orokin to move past their own dying solar system by having another built in an entirely different part of the universe. But with the trip itself, stripping their capability to procreate should they be exposed to the void.
My father was a farmer. My mother, a carpenter. Given light by the Golden Lords to build for them a better world. But family's journey was long. Time began to change their light. Creativity, pride, a will to live.
Although there's no direct proof of this, something changed while en route to their perceived target area, known as Tau in game, giving them their own self-awareness and, based on what we see, significant power, especially when returning to the origin system. An interesting achievement in its own right, given the crippling effects they experienced the first time through. They were quite motivated to defend their new home from the same viral mentality that caused the Orokin to neglect their own, and need a replacement so desperately they would in fact create the very things that would come to destroy them. A bit of cosmic karma, certainly, yet may have in fact had some level of eldritch influence to blame as well. But that last part is speculation at best, and with that in mind, another seemingly alien faction in the end is nothing more than another version of the children of the Orokin coming to claim their parents. The infestation and corresponding tech rot are apparently human-made as well, although the exact group to have done it has been brought into question with the introduction of 1999. It was once believed that the Orokin were its progenitors, using it to attempt to reseed derelict planets, and at the same time, and most famously, create weapons of war, the Warframes being the most significant. And although the infestation has taken on countless forms in different circumstances, it remains a product of the origin system. Bear in mind, the groups that were just described were in fact the only ones in the system for a very long time, and for such a spacefaring people, having colonized in at least some form or fashion not only all the planets of the solar system, but a number of moons as well, one would assume they would have countless astronomers and scientists on the whole with their eyes to the stars, as Entrada himself seems to claim to be the answer to.
Zata. Truth. It began long before us. We who now live our perfect and dull, endless lives. It began long before these moon palaces and body markets hurling around our golden sun. It began long before our light coil thinkers, our radiation wars, our oil, smoke. It began with us, the continuity and its twin, wanderlust. The need for unseen shores deep in our marrow. No judge, jester, queen, or king can escape this old blood. We are nomads, eternal. And when no ocean, mountain, or sky could contain us, our gaze hungered starward. Afar, they mocked us with their brittle light, winking and jeering like dangling iotons, forever out of reach, illuminating the truth. Immortal as we are, we die with the sun. That's where I come in.
But even years after the Tenno awoke, with the Lotus directing them around like militant ambassadors of her perceived order, we still have yet to see anything of what we would consider aliens in almost any other game situated in space. So, it's within this that I have to ask, are you aware of the concept behind what's known as the Fermi Paradox? The story goes something like this. At a gathering of no particular renown, a well-known physicist named Enrico Fermi was having a chat with those around him, and the topic of an unassuming single-panel cartoon drawing illustrating aliens, Fermi postulated the now famous quandary of, well, where is everybody? Referring to a lack of any form of substantiated alien information, be it in person or even verified communications. Anything. If humans had been able to do such a thing, sending out frequencies and radio transmissions, surely other species somewhere in the galaxy would have as well, and why had they not reached out? And perhaps more concerning, why does there appear to be no trace of them either? Warframe's universe experienced a very similar thing, but remember, they were at their peak, decades ahead of 2025 humanity, perhaps even centuries. It's tough to fully say with the claims of the day, but I have to ask again, where are all the aliens? The introduction of Intradi's labs and the murmur absolutely throws a bit of a wrench into things, but given certain context in the game, I'm still more inclined to believe the Indifference and its heralds are much more eldritch in nature than, let's say, alien. And I get it. To some, that might mean the same thing, but I think the situation is much more nuanced, and from my perspective at least, it may in fact be the very answer as to why there are no aliens. Because although it's mostly understood that the cause of the murmur within the Origin system was a product of one in particular, with even Albert Intradi himself believing to this day that the malicious presence he unleashed in his initial journey to the Void is in fact derived of his own persona and manifested by the effects excessive emotional responses seem to have on humans. In this case, fear and confusion from falling into the very void itself, with his protective Seriglass bell failing once exposed to it, and, assumedly, the lens of the untimed door.
The calipers yawed open the wall between worlds, stretching there a black trapezoidal gap. A door, a mouth. It yawned in the light of the room, splintering it to mesmerizing, unearthly hues. And I, inside the bell, dropping obliquely toward it from my gallows. Mass and time rippled as a sudden vortex jawed before me. My head was vapor, my feet lodestone. The bell around me flexed like a rat paralyzed in a winding, gulping snake. I faltered in the awe of it, stumbling against the Seriglass, and with that shifted the bell's path through the wall. It grazed the caliper membrane, the edge of the door. No worldly edge was as thin, as sharp as could split even light. As the bell faintly grazed it, the Seriglass was all at once rendered like strips of flesh by Dax's blade. My enclosure was beheaded in an instant, but still I fell, sideways, into the void. Death was on me, I was certain. I was face down, eyes clenched, my heart pulsing the last of its seconds, and my lungs burning the last of its air. A sudden nostalgia gripped me. I grasped desperately for memory of a storm just past, the fumbling pitch of a child's song. Yet all these thoughts seemed to steal away from my mind like smoke through a vent. I would die empty. I then became aware of another sensation, physical, a web of pain, needles itching into my arm. At once I realized I was alive. Laying in the bell's shattered Seriglass, I groped the ground, warm stone, the floor of my laboratory. So, I had never left. And so, I had failed. Again. I heard a crunch alongside me. Someone stepping through the shattered glass. With great shame, I gasped and rose my head to face my daughter above me. But as I opened my eyes, it wasn't her. It was me.
What if the issue is that our understanding of the void is itself flawed? Let's assume that Palladino was truthful in her dialogue during Chains of Harrow.
Rel's warnings. Those dire consequences. He was talking about void exposure, wasn't he? The effect it has on human minds is well understood.
But it's not. This isn't some kind of deep pressure bends as Margola suspected. Rill saw what it was. Truly, an entity. Indifferent. Old as stars.
If she really was speaking to Rel, perhaps even from the other side of the wall, as she says, and within this dialogue, he revealed to their covenant what he had learned about it specifically, what he now understands about it. And if that was the case, here is where I make the case that the indifference, and in fact all of its heralds, may have been seen before by many others. After all, something Entradi himself was able to discern from its language is this very ominous passage. Through endless faces, countless forms, a multitude unfolds. In fact, the Requiem dialogue, well, if taken as a whole, seems to tell a tale.
From brooding gulfs are we beheld by that which bears no name. Its heralds are the stars it fells, the sky and earth aflame. Corporeal laws are unwrit as suns and love retreat. To cosmic madness, laws submit, though stalwart minds entreat. In luminous space, blackened stars they gaze, accuse, deny. Roiling, moaning, this realm of ours in madness lost shall die. Carrion hordes trill their profane accord with eldritch plans. To cosmic forms from tangent planes, we end as we began.
And if taken in context with what Palladino was able to relay from her source, I'm inclined to believe the entity is older than its encounter with Entradi. Much older. How old are stars? The variation we've come to deal with, it's certainly having an aspect of Outlook, his staying, if you will, on it. But with the emergence of our own operator's entity next to his, well, one, it's becoming more and more likely these two are nothing more than heralds themselves. Think about the wording in the Requiem words, and keep in mind these would have most likely been transcribed years before much of what occurred within the origin system that we've experienced would have come to pass. And I can't help but wonder if countless forms includes other variations we've yet to see, perhaps even mimicking those of alien races it's culled from existence. Warframe's narrative has largely centered around the idea of cycles, things occurring in pattern, repeating methods. So is it possible the origin system and the Tenno aren't the first the indifferences penetrated and taken for itself? Is this the reason we don't see any other aliens in game? The Lotus makes a rather shocking statement at the tail end of the Lotus Eaters that I've always felt was more literal than she let on.
Do you hear it? The calls of angels, devils, life itself. It's grown so loud. It tries to follow in his footsteps through time. You must find him first.
What if what she describes is exactly what we're dealing with? Angels, demons, the devil himself. There are far too many references to this idea and concept from far too many characters, important characters who, through experience, would know or have a much better idea of what they were talking about for it to just all be dismissed out of hand. And it's fascinating to me that in almost every ancient civilization, there exists a flood myth, if that's what you want to call it, as so many corroborating stories would to me sound like a flood fact. But because I have no interest in debating the specifics within a Warframe video, the point is, what if God, whatever you deem that to be, I know what I believe, of course, but what if a periodic culling is just necessary? Say when a species themselves became too powerful, too ambitious, and began to look all too familiar to what many deemed the first who fell, the classical depiction of Lucifer, the morning star, Satan, Beelzebub. He has many names. And what's interesting is there's a lot of ambiguity between these forms. Some say they are the same person. Others draw distinct lines between Lucifer and Satan, and even Beelzebub, and other names, contending them all to be different entities, in fact. And looking at the indifference and how it is creating the same type of misdirection, these behavior patterns just seem all too familiar, do they not? Within the book of Isaiah, we have multiple passages regarding a very specific viewpoint that I'd like to convey. Chapter 44, verse 6 says, "I am the first and I am the last. Besides me, there is no God." Chapter 43, verse 10 states, "You are my witness, declares the Lord, and my servant who I have chosen, that you may know and believe and understand that I am He. Before me, no God was formed, nor shall there be any after me." And within Revelation, two passages make reference to God being the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Now, while I'm not trying to specifically say that the man on the wall is what one might consider the Old Testament God in any way, one that is much more vengeful and aggressive than the counterpart depicted in the New Testament, mind you, and I believe there's a really good reason for that, but you didn't come here for a lesson in Christian theology. So where it becomes relevant in Warframe is, what if it's just the origin system's time?
These gifts you have, a piece of me, given freely. But those before you were butchers, flayed flesh for stolen stars.
Buoyed by the actions of, by all rights, the Orokin and their endeavors. What if the entity is exactly that? The Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. And thus, in my mind, much more accurately represents the idea of a god, a demiurge even, far more than just alien, especially if the entity Palladino describes is, in fact, older than stars.
But those before you, they did not ask. They butchered me. My flesh fed their greed.
It would mean, while maybe having some level of influence from the encounter with Entrati, it is an entity in its own right, and was one that was there most likely even before the origin system. The Master, described in many of the different track lyrics from Whispers in the Walls. How much older than stars the Master is, we don't know. But I can't help but wonder with how obvious this godlike entity can do what it's done already, and with most likely a lot more that we'll have to attempt to clean up, I'm guessing. How does one fight an entity that gave the very power necessary to overcome it? What if it can just take it back? Then what? We've largely done what it's needed us to do, so there hasn't been a reason for it to remove any of our capabilities. But will that always be? Cycles are such a theme in Warframe, and maybe the very reason why we don't see any actual aliens in a space game. Maybe they just had their time and became similarly drunk with power and ego to challenge and attempt to usurp a much greater entity, with perhaps this entity even being a constant within space and time itself. Maybe even another reason for its abilities to move so easily through them both. Only stopped due to the removal of a finger that would let Entrati literally dance with the devil to a stalemate for a long period of time. But it does seem like that time has passed. And for a god, or godlike entity, I would imagine a mere human being able to cage it wouldn't have wonderful repercussions. But what do you think? Are we next? What if we aren't the first group to even have this happen? And again, we're just next in line. Cycles are such a theme in Warframe. I can't help but seeing the potentiality of another one right here. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed today's video and it got you thinking about the complete and total lack of actual aliens, at least from what we've seen in game at the time of this video's recording. And bear in mind, it's been over a decade since the game's been out, so it very well might be a permanent part as well, depending on the condition of Tau, of course, should we get there. But more importantly, I want to thank the channel members for their consistent, valuable knowledge and input, especially in our live sessions, as well as their overall continuing support. This was a really fun video to make, and I look forward to doing more like it in the future, based upon what we go over in those streams. So keep an eye out and become a member if you're interested in contributing in the same way. We'd love to have you. At any rate, I hope you all have a wonderful day today, a wonderful rest of your week, and I'll talk at you all in the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye.